Hey guys, Introspection here. So today I decided to dedicate this video to helping you guys who are buying your first car. We all know a lot of frustration and confusion can come along with buying your first car, and if you really don't know what you're doing, then you can end up with a less than desirable result. I originally intended on making just one video, but there was so much information that I decided it was more practical to split into two. I may even make three depending on how this all works out. The other thing that I need to tell you guys is that the way I research for this video is rather unusual. Most of the time I can give you guys a fact and then the evidence supporting said fact. But there's not really a scientifically proven method of purchasing a car. And even if I could find an article claiming that, which I couldn't, but even if I could, it'd be even less likely that I'd be able to find other articles claiming that same method to make sure that it's not just a random person spouting out babble on the internet. So even though the resources I did use will be linked down in the description below, what I ended up doing is going ahead and consulting people who I know have a high understanding of auto mechanics, and on top of that have purchased a multitude of different cars. On top of that, I went ahead and visited a few dealerships and see what they had to say to people who were buying their first car. I then extrapolated all that information and made these videos. The first thing you guys need to know is how much you're going to spend on the car. Make sure you don't say something ridiculous and say I'm going to spend $1 bajillion on your first car. But if you guys can afford to go ahead and not go too cheap, go ahead and do that. Though it's likely that you guys already figured that part out. The other thing you guys need to consider is where you're going to be driving your car. If you're going to be driving on a smooth road where you don't have to worry about snow or dirt, then you can get away with any kind of drive, whether it's front wheel drive or, as you can see here, rear wheel drive. But if you're going to end up driving somewhere where there's a lot of snow or snows at all during the year, then you're going to want at the very least front wheel drive. And there's a really good reason for this. See, in most cars, not all of them, but in most of them, the engine is at the front. This puts more force down on the front tires, giving the front tires more traction than the rear tires. This makes rear wheel drive not preferable in comparison to front wheel drive when the conditions get snowy. But this is only when you're really desperate. If you're going to end up driving somewhere where there's a lot of snow, then I recommend going with a four-wheel drive car. Just make sure you practice a little with four-wheel drive before taking it out on the road. Even though it's nothing complicated or mind-boggling, it just feels a little different than what you might be used to when just driving a car with just two wheels pulling it or pushing it. So go ahead and practice with four-wheel drive. Also keep in mind that four-wheel drive does use quite a bit more gas than just two-wheel drive. Now, if you end up driving somewhere where there's a dirt road, and granted, most of us won't drive places that require dirt roads on a daily basis, but a few of us like to go camping every few months or maybe visit a few events that require us to go on dirt roads. In this case, you of course want four-wheel drive, but the other thing you want to consider is having your car high up off the ground. And there's again a good reason for this. If you've ever seen a car really low to the ground try to drive through a very uneven terrain, and even if we made the modifications to the engine and the wheels necessary so that the engine and the wheels had the power and grip to actually make it through the terrain, you'd still realize that the bottom of the car is getting hit a lot by the uneven terrain. And then on top of that, it can end up damaging the car, and in some cases you can end up stuck because, well, the uneven terrain will catch the low to the ground car. This is why oftentimes you'll see Jeeps and they'll be high up off the ground so that they can get through the rough terrain with less problems. Now, of course, I'm not talking about like extreme off-roading and driving off the sides of cliffs and hills. That requires an entirely different set of information. I'm just talking getting from your house to a campsite that requires a very uneven dirt road. Four-wheel drive, and make sure your car is significantly high off the ground. And even if you're not going on dirt roads, you may still want to consider making sure your car is at least a little high off the ground. Because what often happens is with cars really low to the ground, when they go ahead and park, they end up hitting the bottom of their car on like that little cement piece that's at the end of the parking spot. That's just a thing that you gotta keep in mind when purchasing your car. The other thing you need to consider is manual versus automatic. I'll be honest, when I was little, I thought that automatic was just the upgraded version of manual. I was very much wrong. As it turns out, these two transmissions have advantages and disadvantages to both of them. With manual, not only is it cheaper to fix and or replace, but on top of that, it's a lot less likely to break on you than automatic. Now, of course, this is a very general statement. You'll often find cars with manual that have poorly built transmissions, and those might last a lot less longer than any other given automatic. But generally speaking, manuals are a lot stronger and easier to replace, as long as cheaper. Of course, there's the disadvantage of the fact that there's a learning curve, more so than with the automatic, and on top of that, it's less ideal for places where there are high traffic areas, since you'd constantly be having to be hitting the clutch. So my recommendation for the manual, if you live in a non-high traffic area and you have someone who really knows what they're doing and can really teach you how to use manual, go ahead and get manual. Just make sure that that person really knows what they're doing, because if you don't drive manual correctly, you are going to destroy the transmission. On the other hand, there's the automatic, which is a lot less of a learning curve and is more ideal for high traffic areas, since you won't be constantly having to switch between gears in the clutch. So again, recommendation is go with the manual if you intend on either A, hauling heavy loads, or just don't live in a high traffic area, since people who drive manual have an easier time going over to transmission as opposed to vice versa. Because if you don't know how to drive manual, you can end up destroying the transmission. But if you don't have somebody who can teach you, or you live in a high traffic area, make sure you go ahead and go with automatic. And I'll be honest, manual just looks cooler. I don't know why. That, of course, should not be a determining factor, really, in whether you choose between automatic and manual. I just think that driving manual does look cooler than driving automatic, in all honesty. The next thing is, do not buy a car with aftermarket modifications, please. And because the thing is that people who usually install these kind of aftermarket modifications, like the nitro oxide or the nitro booster that you see here, are people who are just sort of taking the information off of the internet and hoping that everything connects correctly together. It's a really big gamble. You might end up driving off the parking lot and then blowing up. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. Now, if you know for a fact, and you can see the records, that was done by a reputable mechanic who really knows what he's doing, who mapped out the entire engine, and who made sure the computer systems are all work together in synchronicity with the new aftermarket modifications, then yeah, you should be fine. But unless you know that, or you know that it's from a friend, that you know the car inside and out, you know everything's put together perfectly and there's no problem with the modifications, and possibly even have the warranty still on it, then you should be able to get away with that. But otherwise, if you really don't know about the modifications, do not get it. Now, of course, if it's like aftermarket tires or maybe even a radio or speakers, yeah, you should probably be fine with that. Just test them all out before you actually purchase the car. But modifications like this, yeah, I would steer clear from them at all costs. Well, guys, that's the last piece of advice I have for this video. If you guys have any other car advice that I might be able to include in the other video, who knows, you might be able to make me extend the amount of videos I intend on making, go ahead and leave it in the comment section down below. Otherwise, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell button so that you can see my video in the next 2 weeks. Until then, hear nothing and listen to all. Bye, guys.